Well, they caved, and now is it open season to spend. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto, and don't say I didn't warn you and cast warnings about both parties over this, because just days after some Republicans voted to hike the debt limit to keep the focus on health care, the president is keeping the focus on spending. Try $56 billion worth of spending on everything from new manufacturing institutes to more green initiatives, job training, even universal pre-K. And remember the $230 billion in Social Security savings that the president promised? Well, now that is off the table because Republicans, well, to hear Tea Parties tell it, they got your number, and they couldn't be any happier. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid calling the president's budget a powerful statement of Democratic principles. Nancy Pelosi going even further, labeling it a responsible fiscal framework. But for Tea Partiers already fed up with this endless government spending and what they call mainstream capitulating, enough is enough. Philip Dennis is with the Dallas Tea Party, Julianne Thompson with the Atlanta Tea Party. Julie, to you first, what do you make of this? And I think it was you who had said not too long ago, if you blink, they will spend. Republicans blinked, right?
Well, Neil, I think, first of all, thank you for having me on today. And I just want to say that I think that the vast majority of Americans are sick and tired. They have had enough of politicians that campaign one way and govern another. And right now it would seem that congressional Republicans think that standing for absolutely nothing is going to give them more of a broader appeal. But standing for nothing never won an election. And right now Congress is looking at a 13% approval rating, according to Gallup.
Well, Philip, they say that if they continued standing the way you guys stand for stuff, they'd be down to 3% approval. And they're saying essentially that Tea Parties have cost them valuable time to make their case on health care, all of this stuff, and that it's guys like you, no offense, that have sort of messed things up. So they're ignoring you, essentially.
Well, yes, I think that they are, and they're beating up on heroes like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and Rand Paul, people that have stood for something, people that have become heroes to the American citizens. All you have to do is look at the filibuster from a year ago to see how Republicans and conservatives and many Democrats stood behind the three of them during that.
To Philip on that summit, Philip, if you could just pipe down, we're trying to do this here. But do you agree with that, Philip? Do you think that that message is getting through, or now they've just had it with you and they're risking your wrath by saying the hell with you?
Yeah, well, I've said it before, Neil, is that the only people that hate the Tea Party more than the mainstream propaganda media and the Democrat Party is the Republican Party. And so, yeah, they've had it with us, and we've had it with them, is that, you know, there is no way the Republicans are going to try to rein in spending. They just passed a debt limit increase, and without even one symbolic dollar of spending cuts.
Well, they say that it would have led to a government shutdown. Fairly or not, it would have been pegged to them, and they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to take any of the momentum they sense they're getting going into the fall with Obamacare front and center.
Well, because they're whipped dogs. And what we're seeing as the American people is that there's very little difference between the parties. They only like to waste money on different things between the Democrats and the Republicans. So, no, and that's why you see so many Tea Party fiscal conservatives primarying the Republican establishment and congressmen that have been up there for 15 or 20 years and watched our debt go to $17 trillion. And they have no problem. The Republicans cutting spending is as likely as Michael Moore winning a gold medal in Sochi in the downhill ski. It's just not going to happen.
It's not impossible, but I understand what you're saying.
It is impossible.
All right,
Julianne, yes.
Where does this put the president right now? Obviously, he's seizing the initiative. He's feeling, for whatever reason, that Republicans are not going to balk too much on spending, so he proposes more spending, and then we see this $1 trillion farm bill that became law last week, more talk of infrastructure spending, and bragging about a deficit that's coming down. So the trend is his friend. The polls seem to be stabilizing. What do you make of that?
You know, I really don't understand how Republicans in Congress right now can acquiesce to so much of what they campaigned against when they were running. I fear for the future of our country. I fear for my children that they're not going to enjoy the same free America that I have and that my parents have. And it's just, I really fear for our country. And, you know, going back to what I said before concerning Senator Ted Cruz, all you need to look at is what happened recently with regard to the debt ceiling. You had Republicans essentially voting no along a party line because they knew that they could go home and they could tell their constituents they voted no, when in actuality they wanted to raise the debt ceiling. Otherwise, 5 Republicans wouldn't have crossed over with Democrats to stop the filibuster on Senator Cruz. And right now, they're turning Senator Cruz into a pariah in Washington.
I take it Cruz is your guy then. Julian, Cruz, you like Cruz.
I like Cruz because he stands for something.
Okay, I'm sorry. But Chris Christie is not your guy, Philip. Is that right?
No, Chris Christie is not my guy at all. He's just the latest big government moderate that the Republican establishment wants to serve up as cannon fodder for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Haven't we seen enough of the Mitt Romneys and the John McCains and the Bob Doles and the big government moderates that they lose every time they go up? Even George Bush won because he campaigned as a conservative, although he governed somewhat differently. But conservatives win and conservative fiscal practices win, and they work, while the big government moderates lose. It's just, it's history. It's what happens.
All right, guys. So good of you to stop by today. We appreciate it. Be well.
Thanks for having us.
So back to our basic question. Is the president feeling emboldened by all of this? Who better to ask than our chief White House correspondent, Ed Henry's in New York today. Well, la-da-dee-da.
Oh, wow.
Very good to see you.
Nice to see you, sir.
Is the president taking advantage of this? Is he?
A little bit.
What do you think?
Well, I got to correct you. It's not new spending. It's new investment, Neil.
That's right.
That's the way they would put it. It's investment. And, you know, look, that's the president's case in the midterm elections, which is that he's the guy and the Democrats are the ones who are standing up for the middle class. So they're going to talk about the minimum wage. They're going to talk about, you know, spending money on infrastructure and universal pre-K. Tea Party might not like it, but it's poll test pretty well.
But so what people realize we're broke. We don't have any money.
But so what are both sides doing? It seems like a retreat on both sides. As you laid out at the top, Speaker Boehner and others basically said, we want to kick the can down the road on the debt. You know, the deficit short term is coming down, as you know, but long term the debt's getting worse and worse. But let's kick that can down the road because Republicans think they've got these midterm elections. These elections are months and months away.
So you think the Democrats have their number? They know the Republicans are too frightened to sort of create any
and they don't
fuss.
want to cut spending. Think about the Murray Ryan deal from the end of last year. Both sides said, oh, they came together. That was kind of cool. And then everyone read the details and said, well, actually, they cut some veterans benefits and some deals. And then what did Congress do? They came back and said, let's stop. So
they
where
can't
does
cut
either
anything,
side want to cut? They don't want to cut anything. And in fairness, I don't want to just say that the Republicans are running off the field. What about the president? Campaign in 2008 and 2012, as I don't want to just do small ball. I want to do big things. Back in the 2008 debates, he talked about entitlement reform, Medicare, Social Security, et cetera. Now he's taking these future Social Security benefit cuts with this change CPI deal off the table, something that he had on the table last year.
But if you don't have the appetite to even tinker around the edges and adjust some formulas in a minor way, that would be a rounding error on a rounding error, then you're never going to get to the big stuff,
just say, hey, let's get to some of these big things now. But it's because the election's coming up. So the president's going to be talking about minimum wage.
Well, even after 2014, after November, they're not going to be any more enthusiastic.
Then everyone's going to say, look, let's focus on 2016. So it gets to your bottom line question at the top of the show. When will either side focus on these big issues? And everyone says, we hate playing small ball. We want to do the big things. The Tea Party says, why do they keep spending? And yet everyone's just kind of talking past each other right now.
Is the mood in the White House such that they feel they can score on these issues? These are hot button issues that tend to raising the minimum wage, even in the face of studies that show, like this, I think it was the CBO. 500,000 jobs could be lost. But they don't care. They just say, look, it sounds good. Give people out of poverty.
The CBO report later said that it would help 16.5 million people because it'll put more money in their pockets if they have minimum wage. And those people might spend money at small businesses. You know that better than I do.
So they pick and choose what data supports the argument.
But then there's the same small businesses who might get a burst from the, boost from the money being spent are going to say, I'm not going to hire anybody else because the minimum wage is going up. The government's forcing me to do that.
What about on health care? The big problem for a lot of these business guys, small, medium, large, I talk to, that it's a pall over their spending plans. Does the administration see that, or do they really believe, as they said?
They think it's BS, and they push back on it. And they say, you know, Republicans have been saying the sky's going to fall on this all along, and that it's killing jobs, and they don't believe it is. They don't think it's a Paul.
So they think time will heal a lot of these initial
ones. They think it will,
wounds.
but I think what I would look for in a couple of weeks, you're going to hear more Democrats in the Senate, and because that's the one that's up for grabs. The House is probably still in Republican hands come December 1. But I think the Senate is very much up for grabs, and what I would look for in a couple of weeks is I'm picking up rumblings that there are a few Democrats in the Senate who are starting to say, you know what, we need to come up with some sort of Obamacare fix, if you will. And there needs to be some sort of bill that they're on record with in which they say, we're not for what the president is. We voted for this thing a few years ago, but we want to fix some of this. The question is going to be, is it going to have real teeth? Is it really going to fix it? Or is it just going to be something you can go back to a debate in September and October?
But do they
say,
really think it's working? Do they really think? I mean, I know they talk about the number it was picked up coverage.
I think yes and no.
They don't detail how many are net new people, how many are paying,
and they won't detail
really
who have paid in.
So
how many people have written a check?
What are they smoking?
Well, I mean, look, if you start from the premise that this was a disastrous launch on October 1st, which even the president's acknowledged. Yes, it's gotten better. The website's working now. People are enrolling, more numbers. So the White House can tout some positive news. You can't ignore that. But yes, will the numbers add up? Will enough young people sign up? So we've actually got people paying in. When you know, they keep throwing around different numbers. A couple of days ago, Vice President said, well, it might be 5 or 6 million to enroll. The president last night was throwing out another number. Frankly, I don't think they have a full handle right now on how many people are enrolling. But more importantly, will the math add up? Will enough people sign up, be net, actually more people sign up than people who lost their plans? And will you have enough young people actually paying in so that when we talk about these long-term debt problems, the laws actually work? I mean, look, the president can say healthcare spending is coming down. That's something that Republicans predicted the opposite on, and that is coming down. But that's short-term, medium-term.
That also might be residual from the recession.
Might be from the recession, where people.
Right. Ed Henry, it's always a pleasure, my friend. There are a lot of people who come to the White House. They don't come close to him, and he's not afraid. And I always say with Ed, you know, he was doing this before he came here, but it gets a lot of attention now that he's here. But I've known him to be obnoxious his entire career. I really have.
Well, I like you. I don't know if you find me obnoxious. Personally, I like you.
Ed Henry, thank you. A real pleasure. In the meantime, do any of you remember this?
I also have a health care plan that would save the average family $2,500 on their premiums.
Not quite. Didn't happen. Now a lot of Democrats are at a loss for words.
I thought the Affordable Health Care Act was to save $2,500 per family. What happened?